And also, you get to watch some dogs walk around in the background, which is great. Hello and welcome to finally another outdoor edition of the Car Nerd Talks. Decided to come outside because it's crap in there with everything blank, and also you get to watch some dogs walk around in the background, which is great. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, because today I'm going to be talking about something very special indeed, and by that I mean the Aston Martin Lagonda.
A new car from Britain that combines the heritage of successful Grand Prix racing with some of the most modern technology to be found in an automobile. Elegant and very powerful, everything about this sporting Grand Tourer means motoring at its best.
The Lagonda is a weird car because half of me loves it and the other half of me absolutely loathes it. It's a weird looking creation, and at first it's very strange, but it kind of grows on you. And I'd kind of love to own one. It was born in the 1970s when Aston Martin was once again going through financial troubles. Although it was happily creating its 2+2 sports cars, this wasn't enough and it needed a cash influx. It found this in the form of deposits for the Lagonda. They started with the Series 1, which was a four-door version of the Aston Martin V8, which is basically just an extended DBS. And it was built to gain some hype, so they kept the Aston Martin DBS V8 engine inside. And it was the perfect platform to let the world know that they were going to be working on a new car, and a new sedan at that. Now, they only made 7 of these, and that's all they were able to sell, but it was enough to gain deposits for the Series 2, which would be the Lagonda. So Bill, or William Towns, who was a seat designer at Aston Martin prior to this project, was put in charge of the Lagonda project. So William Towns, or Bill Towns, wanted to go with an extreme folded paper style. And if you don't know what that is, look at the Countach, the Lotus Elise, or the DeLorean, that kind of wedge shape that really captures the style. Now, if you look at this Aston Martin Lagonda, half of you, I'm sure, will absolutely hate it, and the other half will absolutely love it. And that's what they were going for. Bill wanted this to be polarizing, because the reason for that is when you make something polarizing, people talk about it. Regardless of whether they hate it or love it, they talk about it. And you'll see this last year with the Cybertruck. And that's what Elon Musk was going for. He didn't care whether people loved it or hated it. He just wanted the attention, and it got exactly what it needed. And it was the same with this Aston Martin Lagonda. It was talked about.
Pardon me, would you have any Grey Poupon?
But of course.
Grey Poupon, one of life's finer pleasures.
In building this car, they decided that they were going to make it an extreme luxury car and give it a price to boot. It was in the same league as the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, the Bentley Mulsanne, and as such it needed to have either a lot of toys or something, because it couldn't just compete with those on point. So it went with a digital display instead. So this was the first ever car with a digital display in the dash, and it was using LEDs. So it was very much like a cockpit from space. Sadly, this is Aston Martin, and as such it wasn't exactly the most reliable dash, and unfortunately they had to cut that out. And in 1986 they switched from LEDs to CRTs, and this turned out to be even less reliable than the initial LED screens. But it did look very futuristic, and it again garnered much attention, like the looks of this car. They also decided that with this Series 1, they were going to give it the same engine as the 1974, or with this Series 2, sorry, they were going to give it the same engine as they did with the Series 1. And the reason they did this is because it was a roaring V8 from the DBS, and people love that engine. Now, unfortunately, unlike the Series 1, the Series 2, which both had the same engine, was slightly slower because it was heavier. So the Series 1 prototype that was released in 1974 and sold a whopping 7 had 148 mph top speed and a 0 to 60 of 8.8 seconds. This car was ever so slightly slower at 143 mph and an 8.8 second 0 to 60 time. The car was unveiled at the London Motor Show in 1976, and the press were surprised to see the only thing it had in common, like I said, was that engine. So when they said they were going for a high-end luxury car, they weren't kidding. This thing retailed in 1980. The year after its first production was delivered in 1979 for £49,933. That made it more expensive than the Rolls-Royce Corniche and the Ferrari 400. And when the deliveries began, it surprisingly actually sold. So this Series 2 version ran until 1986 from 1979 and would sell roughly 300 units as far as I'm aware, 350 units. And then the Series 3 with the CRT screen and some slight upgrades would go on to sell 75 units, with the final run of the Series 4 running for 2 to 3 years and selling another 200 units. Now the Series 4, they called it a complete overhaul of the design, and as you can see, it's slightly different. They made it slightly curvier and changed the front end, but that's really about it. They kept the futuristic interior, but kind of changed the dials and stuff to make it a little bit more reliable. Over the course of its 8-year history, the Aston Martin Lagonda would go on to sell 675 units. And you know, that doesn't sound like a lot, but for a hand-built car at that price, that's quite a lot. And the deposits alone and the money down on this car would actually keep Aston Martin afloat. Because like I said, when they started pitching this in the 70s, the reason for it was that the company was going bust and they needed something to draw them out of this. So the 1976 to 1988 car, which was actually only delivered from 1979 to 1987 as far as to 1989 as far as I know, so 10-year run total I guess, sold 675 units and stopped Aston Martin from going bust. Ironically, history does repeat itself, and the reason I'm making that joke is because in 2008, history did repeat itself when Aston Martin needed to recreate the Lagonda in the form of the Aston Martin Rapide. And the reason for this name was Aston Martin bought the brand Lagonda in 1947, and in 1961 they released the Lagonda Rapide. And as you can see, they decided that it would be a good idea to use this name again when creating the Aston Martin Rapide in 2008, which was delivered first in 2010. Now, again, like the Lagonda, the Rapide, they gave a $200,000 asking price, which was just insane, and it couldn't compete, and it didn't sell very well, but Aston Martin sugared on. The sad part is Aston Martin now in 2020 is once again facing bankruptcy, and given all this going on with the coronavirus right now, people are probably not out shopping for high-end, fast luxury cars. And it seems like Aston Martin is probably going to go the same way as it did when it was taken over taken over in the 40s, and hopefully this time it's taken over by someone who really wants to keep the vision going, because Aston Martin of late is creating some really, really awesome cars, and it would be really sad to see that end. So let's hope that they come out with something like the Lagonda, which saves them from their bankruptcy once again. And let's hope that you like and subscribe this video so that I can research more cars instead of doing actual work. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.